Greetings, Greg. Today's talk focuses on two areas. In the short term, over the next couple of weeks, what happens with Tesla's stock price. The second thing we cover is what I call elements of Elon Musk on what I call the Viet Cong plan. So this is Greg for Tesla Fan Insight. Thanks once again for joining us. If this is your first time on our channel, please take time to like and subscribe. If this is your first time on our channel, please take time to like and subscribe. If you're a repeat visitor, welcome back. I have some rolling footage behind me of the Tesla Model S GT car. So I wanted to kind of get that queued up, so I apologize for the back turn. Good morning, Donovan. Thanks for joining us. Please note that those of you who do say hello to us, we can see you, but we typically respond at the end so we don't interrupt the flow of the show. Just a reminder, we do have ads. By watching 6 or 7 seconds, it definitely helps support the channel. So does liking, hitting the like button. And then finally, just a reminder, we are on Patreon as well. Could use your support in that space also. Today's, my goal is to sort of keep us in that 3-show-a-week zone. Today's show topic, as I shared with you, is we're kind of taking a look at what happens over the next week or two on Tesla's stock price and sort of, elements that I think are really interesting and that add a lot of value in terms of what we learn from what's going on. As you all know, this past week, I suggested that you guys think about maybe buying some options on Tesla to the upside and making a lot of money in the process. As you all know, the price went from about $295 to $350 a share. And kind of the question is, what happens from there? As you know, we tend to cover a wide range of things not usually covered about what's happening with Tesla. And what I love about the whole stock piece is you can leverage your knowledge or ownership of the vehicle to actually make money and possibly pay for your car in the process. Today's sort of discussion focuses on, in the first frame, what's going to happen. So there are, interestingly enough, two groups, the short shorts and the long shorts. A short short, it might be somebody who's in a stock for a few minutes, a few hours, a day or so, and they're trying to sort of get the benefit of the stock performance they're looking for in that very short window of time. The problem you have with this, obviously, is the stock may not do what you want that quickly, and therefore you lose a lot of money being exposed to those instruments for such a short period of time. I'm sort of amazed, impressed by how the stock market can work to either create or destroy wealth quickly. As you all know, a big listing item is the fact that with the 50-point move up of Tesla stock, the shorts have paper losses of about $2 billion. We're now getting into a very interesting period because first you have announcement of earnings. The analysts of the stock will then spend a lot of time reviewing what all that data is, and now they start putting out reports, and those reports are what the large institutional investors will use to determine how to deal with the stock of that company. In the case of Tesla, the short-term discussion is the fact that the stock is actually up. The question is what happens from here, and I'm kind of just looking at over the, let's say, the next 2 to 3 weeks. The answer that I'm coming up with is the fact that now that we have some numbers on Tesla and the going out of business is starting to move off the table, we now have a question as to what is going to happen next with the stock price. And it's fun to watch some of the negative stories coming out to create narratives about Tesla may having been able to get through, the window of the 5,000 production, heading for 6,000, but are the financials in such bad shapes that they go out of business anyway. One of the elements of this analysis that's been tickling my brain heavily is the fact that after the intent was announced a few weeks ago, one of the analysts kind of screamed almost, and I now understand why. And the reason is that if you have a lot of money to do analysis of Tesla, what had been determined was that without that tent, there was no way they could get the throughput necessary to meet the production goals they discussed. And with that tent, they now are able to do it. And the analysis was perfect to have Elon Musk pinned down perfectly previously. So I think this is amazing, fascinating, because a focused Elon is very hard to deal with, and he knows the numbers he needs to meet in order to get the performance throughput that he needs to actually be able to support the stock, with revenue figures and what those revenue figures are and what Wall Street expects and the timeliness of when those actually show up. So I'm pleased that they achieved where they are now. I do think there are still some question marks lurking, like the fact that the people in the tent putting together those cars are in many cases the best mechanics from around the world who are on the Tesla team. And so Tesla's going to have the problem of rotating those people back into their regular workspaces in different states, et cetera, and then training in new people to work in their capacity. And hopefully they're able to maintain the quality of execution, because I actually think it's possible that the hand-built tent vehicles may be as good, if not better, than the machine-built vehicles that are coming off the production line. So this is kind of an interesting sort of sidebar of what's going on. In general, what normally happens is that if the news is good on a stock, the analysts come out and say everything's great. And now this gives everybody, particularly the large institutional investors like pension funds, the green light to buy large amounts of the stock. This has been happening with Apple, Amazon, all these different companies. And when we get to Tesla, we haven't seen the similar sort of execution going on. Uh, I guess the intrigue for me on this whole thing is the fact that at the end of the day, there's no great news coming out on Tesla. And the reason is that many of the analysts that are charged with defining what the Tesla future is in the short to medium term are being paid heavily by the hedge funds to sort of identify problem areas and highlight them rather than the overall positive news that might be coming off of the stock. So I bring this up because basically what I'm suggesting is that even though the news is good, even though Tesla should have a nice push in the stock price, it's my belief that the analysts would find ways to praise on one hand, but provide enough. There's got to be some negative here to try to prevent an explosive move of the stock, because as the stock moves up explosively, there are a lot of people that lose a lot of money in the process, and they do what's called breaching covenants, meaning that once your losses get to a certain level, you're in a zone now where you breach covenants that were agreed upon that result in your having to shut down your fund. And that's a real possibility for some very wealthy people. So the battle of the Tesla stock process is still in place. Overall, I think that the stock sort of settles into the mid 370s over the next 2 or 3 weeks. And then how we move towards 6,000 in production will tend to sort of push that to develop an average price in the 340s or an average price in the 360s. It is possible that Tesla gets to $400 a share in the next week and a half, only because if the move starts going strong against the shorts, there are a lot of them that will have to cover, which means they have to buy the stock in order to get themselves out of jeopardy. So I think it's worth watching, because if you're taking the time to own or buy or study future purchase of the stock, again, it's a nice idea to be able to make some money off of the stock and its move up, which can help fuel the rest of your ownership experience with Tesla. The next area I wanted to cover is what I call the Elon Musk Viet Cong phenomenon. So I was a history major in college at Stanford as one of my degrees, as well as economics. And one of the areas that I love to study is wars and the impact on the world, et cetera. And as you know, Vietnam was a pretty ugly situation for the U.S. government and U.S. forces. One element of it that I always found fascinating after studying it, and most recently a bunch of the video that's come out, is that there was an underestimation that was made by the United States relative to the Viet Cong, which was that the U.S. had the plan of bombing and other methods to try to sort of pry the hands of the Viet Cong off of the country. And it was explained quite simply by a Viet Cong soldier that what America didn't realize is that at the end of a war, America was going home. In the case of the Vietnamese, there was no place to go, there was no home to go to. So they would either defend their country till death um, and continue to do so on a permanent basis. So I just thought it was interesting because as we see methods for Elon Musk to meet the performance metrics necessary to succeed, I'm fascinated because many people are expecting tactics normally uh, coming from normal executives. And the bottom line is Elon Musk does things like sleep in the factory. Elon Musk does things like build a tent and start building cars. Nobody does that in the car business. So there's all these things that he's willing to do, which you have to call guerrilla tactics for how you get the win. And the bottom line is that, you know, there's there's an amazing amount of money behind Elon Musk's energy, and for him, it's a life or death issue. So, as you all may recall from earlier videos we've done, we kind of talked about the fact that, Elon Musk, in his effort to get Tesla to succeed, actually went triple negative. He got loans to keep the company afloat as the Model S came out, that resulted in his bouncing into a negative net worth. So now that he's worth $19 billion and he has his wealth spread across ownership of a lot more companies, for somebody willing to go negative net worth to have his company succeed, that is pretty gangster, or a move that he's making that suggests that the ends to which he's willing to go to get this company to succeed include him willing to go into bankruptcy. So if he's got $19 billion and he's willing to go to bankruptcy to get it done, I think the chances of Tesla succeeding and not going to bankruptcy are pretty high. But it also suggests that um, I think it's fair to assume, particularly now that Model 3 is flowing out the factory and the batteries are increasing in quantity to support it, that this is a great stock to own. And there may be hiccups in terms of places like Norway and other places having service issues with the vehicle, but there's a determined effort to get this whole project to succeed. And regardless of the number of naysayers that are throwing out what may or may not occur, uh, one can be confident that this will actually be a successful enterprise going forward. I, you know, I keep collecting as I move around and I meet people with Model 3s in particular. I keep collecting issues from different owners that they've suggested one might think about. And the one that I would say that came up that I thought was a legitimate gripe is that this week was that one of the Model 3 owners was saying because it's the vehicle's so heavily reliant on the phone, the boot up of the relationship between phone and car can actually result in a lag that is noticeable, but it's not a huge problem. Something to note as a sidebar item. As we covered previously, there are also challenges with if you don't have a hookup to your carrier, in this case Verizon in this area, that can also affect if you're not carrying your card and the ability to get your car going. So in general, my goal for this week or this show was really to cover the fact that I think that it's a great time to pick up some more shares if you can in Tesla. I think that the short term is going to be a very strong period for the stock as institutions move to increase their positions to make sure that they don't miss out on a nice run of the stock over the next couple of months. I also think that as we move to 6,000 a day in production, this also further bolsters the case for their bonds coming to par, as well as the stock actually doing better things in the short term and establishing a higher base for what the operating range is going to be going forward. And so you might be able to pick up some shares, maybe 5 to 8 points lower, but I think that we sort of establish a new normal in that 340 to 350 range. And then if this week is as strong as I think it's going to be, the new norm ends up being 20 or 30 points higher with the possibility of a strong move into the 400s from here. So definitely worth paying some attention to. Uh, uh, True. Yeah, 350 was something that we were looking for, and I think it obviously has happened. But now, not getting greedy, but I just think that 6 to 7,000 units of production belies a certain level of earnings that results in some, nice further up movement of the stock and stabilization of the company in general. As always, uh, Jacques, Donovan, thanks for taking time out to join us once again. Donovan, thanks for your Swedish photos there. I was hoping to see maybe a Tesla near the water or something like that. A motel with some charging station is nice, but it's a beautiful country, and it'd be lovely to pick up some of the trees and other nature elements of what's going on there. So if you head over to our Tesla Fan Insight on Facebook, we're posting a regular array of what's going on in our service facility here. And so, I think that you guys will be happy to be able to sort of dive in and see colors and sort of what's happening in our local service facility in the process. At any rate, want to again thank you all for taking time out to join us. Just please reminder, like, subscribe, support on Patreon would be appreciated. Please also note we're being copied by a bunch of other entities, so if you're not watching us on YouTube, please take time to do so because it hurts the channel to keep having our subscribers rise and number of views decline as we have entities copying our show and placing it in places that is not YouTube. So again, please head over to YouTube for Tesla Fan Insight because it's the only authorized location for our show. Also, please take time to comment. Love any and all comments. Our next show is back to trucks again. There are several questions that were posed by users that have resulted in us having enough inquiry questions to actually be, a third to a half of a show. And I love when I get into trucks because it's one of the big focuses of our viewership. Again, tschüss, macht's gut, German, au revoir, French, lehitraot, Hebrew, farvel, Dutch, enough respect, walk good man in Jamaican. And look forward to any and all comments at the end. And want to thank you all for getting up early to join us. Have a great day, and we'll look forward to our next conversation.